The grand stage of the Dorian TV Awards glimmered under the spotlights as celebrities and industry leaders filled the hall. Among the most anticipated attendees of the night was Prince Harry, who had flown in for what he believed would be a celebration of his philanthropic efforts and media projects, especially his recent documentary series that had gained global attention. Harry entered with a warm smile, his tailored suit exuding elegance. Photographers rushed to capture the moment, flashes illuminating his every step. Guests turned to watch him glide down the red carpet, expecting the evening to be filled with royal charm. What Harry didn't know was that a subtle but deliberate omission awaited him, one that would change the tone of the night entirely. As he walked past the press wall, journalists called out questions, mostly about his latest Netflix project and upcoming charity events. While Harry answered politely, he couldn't help but notice the announcers referring to him simply as Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, on occasion, but other times just as Harry Windsor, a name that seemed stripped of royal significance. The tension began brewing backstage when Harry overheard a producer instructing the hosts to avoid emphasizing his royal title during introductions. He froze for a moment, unsure if he had heard correctly, but the words were clear: no need for the full royal style. Keep it casual, just Harry. That casual dismissal struck him deeper than the bustling noise around him. Sitting in his reserved seat near the front, Harry tried to shake off the unsettling feeling. The awards show was known for being unconventional, quirky, and even irreverent. Still, this felt personal. After all, the title wasn't just ceremonial, it was a part of his identity, heritage, and public recognition. And tonight, it seemed like someone was determined to erase it from the script. When the hosts finally introduced him to the stage to present an award, the moment arrived. The room hushed, cameras zoomed in, and the voice echoed through the hall: "Please welcome, Harry Windsor." No, Prince. No, Duke. Just the stark, common form of his name. The audience clapped politely, unaware of the sting it carried for the man walking toward the podium. Harry paused mid-step, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. For a fraction of a second, the charm disappeared from his face, replaced by a look of sheer disbelief. He reached the podium, holding the golden envelope, but the energy in his voice was noticeably colder. He thanked the audience, yet there was a sharpness under the polite tone that hinted at his growing frustration. As he opened the envelope, his hands were steady, but his mind raced. Was this a deliberate act of disrespect? Or perhaps an industry statement about moving away from royal traditions? Either way, the timing felt calculated, especially given the tensions between the Sussexes and the royal family in recent years. The award presentation concluded without issue, but the applause did little to ease his mind. Harry returned to his seat, glancing briefly toward the producer's table. He caught one of them smirking, not in a friendly way, but as if they knew exactly what they had done. That single expression ignited something deep inside him. As the night went on, he noticed the pattern. Every time his name appeared on the teleprompter, it was Harry Windsor. Even the printed program cards omitted his royal designation. It wasn't an accident, it was policy. The more he thought about it, the more it felt like a calculated snub, one meant to strip away a part of his public identity in front of the entire entertainment world. Meghan, sitting a few seats away, noticed his unease. She leaned toward him during a commercial break and whispered, "Are you all right?" Harry gave a tight smile and nodded, but his eyes told a different story. He was replaying the host's words in his head over and over, each repetition stoking his growing sense of indignation. The Dorian TV Awards were famed for honoring inclusivity, diversity, and respect in the arts. That's why this gesture seemed so jarring, ironic even. For a show that prided itself on celebrating identities, they had chosen to publicly strip his away, at least in title, in front of millions of viewers. During another segment, the host made a light joke about Harry Windsor's new Hollywood lifestyle, prompting polite chuckles from the crowd. But to Harry, it felt like yet another jab, mocking not just his title but also his decision to build a life outside the traditional royal structure. Harry shifted in his seat, his hands gripping his knees. His mind drifted back to the countless times his title had been a bridge, opening doors for his charitable causes, lending weight to his advocacy. Now, here in this glittering hall, it was as if those years of service and representation had been erased with a single editorial decision. A presenter at the table next to him leaned over during a lull in the program. "Didn't know they dropped your title tonight," she murmured with a sympathetic look. Harry nodded curtly, confirming it wasn't just in his head. Others had noticed the omission. This was no private slight, it was visible to everyone in attendance. The tension inside him reached its peak when the final segment began. The main host returned to the stage for closing remarks, thanking various guests and honorees by their official titles, every single one except him. Lords, dames, and knights were introduced properly. When it came to Harry, the host simply said, "Thanks to Harry Windsor for joining us tonight." Harry's face tightened. It was clear now, this wasn't oversight, it was deliberate. The applause washed over him like cold rain. He felt the sting of public diminishment, a stripping away of a part of his identity in front of the world. Meghan's hand reached for his, but Harry had already made his decision. He leaned toward her and quietly said, "We're leaving." She gave a brief nod, her expression a mix of support and frustration. Together, they rose from their seats, catching the attention of several audience members. The cameras, always eager for drama, quickly panned toward them. The sight of Harry standing abruptly, his posture stiff and his jaw set, sent a ripple through the room. Whispers spread as people realized he was leaving before the show had concluded. The hosts tried to continue with their closing remarks, but it was clear the focus had shifted. Social media posts started appearing instantly, guests snapping quick photos and videos of Harry and Meghan making their way toward the exit, their expressions composed but cold. Harry walked with deliberate steps toward the rear doors, each stride echoing in the hushed venue. Meghan followed closely, her gaze fixed forward, avoiding the eyes of curious onlookers. The atmosphere felt thick with silent judgment, and Harry could almost hear the unspoken questions swirling behind him. As they passed the press area, a cluster of photographers instinctively raised their cameras. Harry's clenched jaw and piercing eyes spoke volumes. The images captured in those seconds would soon dominate headlines worldwide, proof of a royal storming out of a high-profile event. A security guard stepped forward to guide them out, but Harry didn't slow his pace. The cool night air hit his face as they exited into the service corridor, bypassing the glittering main lobby. Meghan glanced at him, sensing the storm still raging within, and chose to remain silent for now. Outside, the waiting car was already surrounded by a small number of paparazzi who had lingered in hopes of an unplanned shot. They got more than they expected, Harry and Meghan emerging early, their expressions unguarded. The photographers shouted questions, but Harry ignored them, climbing swiftly into the back seat. As the car pulled away, Meghan broke the silence. "You didn't have to leave like that," she said softly, though without criticism. Harry shook his head. "They didn't just forget, Meg. They made a point. It was intentional. And I won't sit there and smile while they strip away who I am." Meghan reached over, placing her hand gently on his. "Your worth isn't in a title," she reminded him. But Harry's gaze remained fixed on the city lights passing outside. "It's not about ego," he said. "It's about respect, and tonight, they decided I didn't deserve any." Meanwhile, back at the awards hall, the incident was already dominating the online conversation. Viewers were posting clips of Harry leaving, some expressing support, others mocking the perceived overreaction. Hashtags began trending, with debates raging over whether the omission was justified or petty. Inside the production control room, the show's senior producer watched the social media frenzy with a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. They had expected a reaction, but not one this explosive. It was clear the story would overshadow the winners of the night. Publicists began scrambling, drafting statements for both the awards committee and Harry's team. The narrative battle was underway, each side trying to frame the walkout in their own favor before the morning headlines locked the story in place. By the time Harry and Meghan returned to their hotel, the buzz was inescapable. News notifications lit up their phones. Meghan scrolled through a feed full of speculation, reading aloud some of the more absurd takes, trying to lighten the mood, but Harry wasn't laughing. "They knew exactly what they were doing," Harry said, pacing across the suite. "If it had been anyone else, any actor, politician, they'd have shown the proper courtesy. But with me, they wanted to make a statement." Meghan sat on the edge of the bed, watching him carefully. "So what's your move? Ignore it, or respond?" she asked. Harry stopped pacing. "If I ignore it, they win. If I respond, I set the record straight. And I'm not about to let them write this narrative without me." That night, Harry's communications team drafted a carefully worded statement. It didn't mention anger or offense, but it did point out the intentional omission in the message it sent. They emphasized his continued commitment to service, both in and out of the royal institution. The awards committee released their own statement the next morning, claiming they meant no disrespect, and that the use of Harry Windsor was simply part of their informal, inclusive tone. But the public wasn't convinced. Many saw it as a thinly veiled excuse. On breakfast TV shows, commentators debated whether the omission was harmless or insulting. Royal experts were brought in to weigh the historical significance of titles, and clips of Harry storming out were replayed endlessly, fueling the controversy. In the UK, tabloids seized the opportunity to frame the walkout as proof of Harry's thin skin, while more sympathetic outlets in the US framed it as an act of self-respect in the face of deliberate provocation. By midday, the story had reached global attention. Social media was flooded with opinion polls, reaction videos, and think pieces. Some argued that Harry's decision to leave brought more awareness to the issue of respect and identity than if he had stayed silent. That evening, Harry agreed to a short interview with a trusted journalist. Sitting in a softly lit studio, he calmly explained his decision. It wasn't about a name. It was about principle. When you take someone's title away in a setting where it should be recognized, you're making a statement, one that says, you're less than who you are. The interviewer pressed him on whether the incident reflected ongoing tensions with the royal family. Harry deflected, focusing instead on the importance of acknowledgement and fairness, no matter one's background or role. Meghan, seated beside him, added her perspective. We've both faced situations where people try to diminish us. For Harry, it's about his heritage and the work he's done under that title. Stripping it away in that setting wasn't lighthearted, it was targeted. The interview aired to high ratings, and public opinion began to shift in Harry's favor. Many viewers appreciated the calm, measured tone he used to explain the walkout, contrasting with the more dramatic portrayals in the press. Meanwhile, sources inside the Dorian TV Awards revealed that there had been internal disagreements about how to introduce Harry. Some staff members reportedly argued for full use of his royal title, but the showrunners insisted on keeping it casual. Those leaks only fueled the debate further, as critics accused the awards committee of hypocrisy, preaching inclusivity while disregarding someone's identity for the sake of making a statement. In the days that followed, several high-profile figures voiced their support for Harry, including actors, activists, and even a few politicians. Each emphasized that regardless of personal opinions about the monarchy, respect for titles and roles was a matter of basic courtesy. The controversy eventually prompted the awards committee to issue a second, more formal apology. They admitted that the omission had been a creative choice, meant to align with the tone of the event, but acknowledged that it had caused unintended offense. Harry accepted the apology publicly, but many suspected his patience was wearing thin with how often he found himself at the center of such controversies. Still, he used the moment to reiterate his focus on charitable causes and advocacy work. Meghan suggested they turn the media spotlight into something positive. Together, they announced a donation to a veterans charity, using the attention from the walkout to drive awareness and support. The move was widely praised, with commentators noting that Harry had managed to shift the conversation from personal offense to public service, a tactic he had employed successfully before. Over the following week, coverage of the incident slowly faded, replaced by other headlines. But within the entertainment industry, the walkout remained a talking point, a reminder of how small decisions on stage could spark major fallout. Harry himself refused to dwell on it publicly any further. In private, however, he remained convinced that the incident was not just a coincidence, but part of a broader pattern of subtle digs aimed at undermining his public image. Meghan, ever the strategist, advised him to focus on future appearances where they could control the narrative. "Next time, we choose the platform," she said, and Harry agreed wholeheartedly. They turned their attention to upcoming projects, including a new documentary series and a high-profile charity gala. Every detail would be managed in-house, from introductions to press coverage, ensuring there would be no repeat of the Dorian debacle. Despite the controversy, invitations continued to pour in from other award shows and events, many eager to demonstrate that they would treat the Duke of Sussex with the respect his title demanded. Harry accepted a few select engagements, each handled with meticulous care. At one such event, he was introduced with his full title, and the warm applause that followed felt like a quiet victory over the slight he had endured at the Dorian Awards. Privately, friends noted that the Dorian incident had left a deeper mark on Harry than he admitted. It wasn't just about the words, it was about the principle, and the reminder that no matter how far he stepped from royal life, people would still find ways to challenge his place. Meghan understood this better than anyone. "They'll test you," she told him one evening, "just to see how you react. But every time, you decide how the story ends." In the months that followed, Harry leaned into that philosophy, carefully choosing when to speak out and when to let things slide. The Dorian walkout became one of those defining moments, remembered not for the drama, but for the stand it represented. For many supporters, the sight of Harry leaving the stage that night symbolized self-respect in the face of subtle humiliation. For critics, it was proof of oversensitivity. But for Harry himself, it was simply the right thing to do. The incident even inspired op-eds and academic discussions about the role of titles in modern society, whether they still held meaning, and how they intersected with identity in a world increasingly skeptical of monarchy. Harry welcomed the discussion, even if it had come from an unpleasant spark. "If it makes people think about respect and acknowledgement," he told a friend, "then maybe it wasn't such a bad night after all." The Dorian Awards, too, learned from the backlash. In the following year's ceremony, they went out of their way to honor each guest precisely as they preferred to be addressed, proof that even the entertainment world could adjust under public scrutiny. While the committee never fully admitted fault beyond their public apology, insiders confirmed that Harry's walkout had forced a serious review of their protocols. For Harry and Meghan, the incident became just another chapter in their ongoing journey of navigating public life on their own terms. It was a reminder that even in spaces meant for celebration, the politics of perception were always at play. Friends close to them noticed a subtle shift in Harry afterward, more guarded, more deliberate in his public interactions. The days of walking blindly into potentially hostile spaces were over. Meghan's influence in this transformation was clear. Her insistence on preparation and control over their public image became a core part of their strategy moving forward. When asked about the Dorian Awards months later, Harry offered only a wry smile and the words, "Some nights just aren't meant to be finished." It was his way of closing the chapter without reigniting the fire. By then, the world had moved on to new stories and scandals, but for those who had been there that night, the image of the Duke of Sussex standing and walking out would remain vivid. Some saw it as a mic drop moment, others as a quiet protest. Either way, it had left its mark, both on the event and on Harry's public narrative. In his private life, Harry found peace in knowing he had acted according to his principles. "It's not about whether people agree," he told Meghan one evening. "It's about whether I can look at myself and know I didn't just sit there and take it." Meghan agreed, adding, "And you didn't. You stood up, literally." Her small smile lightened the moment, and Harry laughed for the first time in days after the incident. Over time, the story became almost an anecdote among their close friends, told with a mixture of humor and pride. "Remember when Harry stormed out of the Dorians?" became a line that always earned a chuckle. Yet, beneath the laughter, the deeper meaning remained. It was a moment that had tested Harry's patience, resolve, and sense of self-worth, and he had chosen to walk rather than let it slide. That choice, in its simplicity, resonated with people far beyond the royal sphere. It spoke to anyone who had ever felt diminished, erased, or intentionally overlooked. And so, the incident lived on in the public consciousness, not as a scandal, but as a lesson in boundaries and self-respect. Harry and Meghan continued their work, appearing at events where they were welcomed and respected, avoiding those where they sensed hostility. The media, always hungry for drama, eventually found new stories, but some journalists still cited the Dorian walkout as a turning point in how Harry handled public engagements. It was a reminder that even in the glittering world of entertainment, the subtleties of protocol and respect could ignite powerful emotions. 78. Harry, for his part, saw it as one of many battles in a long campaign to define himself outside the rigid structures of the monarchy. The Dorian TV Awards became a footnote in his story, but one with sharp edges, a night when he refused to let someone else decide how he would be seen. And as the years passed, those who remembered that night knew one thing for certain. When faced with silent disrespect, the Duke of Sussex would never hesitate to stand and walk on his own terms.